In the Simulation presents Am I an NPC in the Simulation? Sleeping Players and the Evolution of Consciousness in a Simulated World. Part 2. Collective and Systemic Simulation Awareness. Stages 2.1, 3.1, and 3.2. Chapter 4. The Rules Stage. 2.1. The Faction Loop. People gather at the edges of the patterns they see, building fortresses of belief to explain the glitches. They act awake, but they are merely running a more sophisticated script. While the pattern stage, 1.2, is marked by individual curiosity about glitches, and the player stage, 1.3, by individual attempts at agency, the rule stage, 2.1, represents a critical shift in consciousness, where the perceived patterns and glitches begin to drive the formation of collective identity and adherence to shared structures of the rules governing reality. Having sensed the uncanny, the individual fragment is no longer content with the purely reactive isolation of the binary stage, but instead of fully embracing individual agency and the fluid nature of reality like the player, the fragment here seeks safety, meaning, and power in numbers. This is the stage of the faction PC, as described in Appendix B, an entity defined by their allegiance to a group and their commitment to its shared understanding of the rules governing reality. The core understanding at this level is acceptance and adherence to simulation parameters, not through blind obedience, but through the perceived necessity of shared rules for collective stability and identity. Having seen glimpses of the unpredictable, glitches, sync signals, the faction PC craves order. They find comfort and purpose in belonging to a group that articulates a shared narrative about the simulation, its rules, and their place within it. This stage is a crucial step in the journey of consciousness, moving beyond isolated experience towards social engagement. However, it contains a significant trap. It can become a sophisticated faction loop, a prison of collective code that feels like awakening, but is merely a more elaborate form of being stuck. Rule-based identity, the faction PC. The binary NPC's identity is passively inherited tribal programming, T3. The player actively designs their identity as a fluid interface, T2. The faction PC's identity is built upon rule-based identity, a shared understanding of the simulation, or debris field, articulated and enforced by the group. Having seen the cracks, pattern stage, the fragment at this level experiences a deep need to patch them with a coherent narrative. Individual pattern recognition is pulled into a collective understanding. The glitches are no longer just strange, they are interpreted through the lens of the faction's dogma. Synchronicities are signs reinforcing the group's beliefs. The rules of the simulation are defined, agreed upon, and fiercely defended by the collective. The faction PC finds their place and purpose within this shared structure. Strong belief in following the proper simulation protocols. The faction defines what is correct behavior, what patterns are significant, and how to interpret the glitches. Adherence is paramount. Commitment to following perceived rules of reality. The group narrative becomes the lens through which all experience is filtered. What the faction says is real for the faction PC. Desire for stability and preservation of social order. Having glimpsed the chaos beyond the binary loop, the faction PC sees simulation stability, as defined by the faction, as paramount. They are protective of the group's internal harmony and external boundaries. Formation of group identity and community guidelines. This is the defining mechanism. Fragments coalesce around a shared interpretation of the patterns, building tribes, ideologies, religions, political parties, or online communities based on a shared understanding of the system rules. Forms groups based on shared understanding of system rules, Appendix B. This stage introduces the dynamics of collective consciousness in a tangible way. Fragments begin to network, but the network structure is rigid.
defined by the agreed-upon rule set. 2. Acting aware, stuck in code. The paradox of the rules stage is that individuals often feel more aware than those in the binary stage. They are actively discussing patterns, dissecting events, and aligning with a narrative that purports to explain reality at a deeper level. They see themselves as activated, as having moved beyond the sheep or normies. Yet they are still running on code. This is a sophisticated NPC layer, automated via belief systems. Their responses are dictated not by raw instinct, 1.1, or individual choice, 1.3, but by the complex, pre-programmed algorithms of their chosen faction's dogma. They respond to inputs, events, new information, based on whether they validate or contradict the group's script. Dissent, within or without the group, triggers predictable, automated reactions designed to protect the ideological framework. In the reintegralism view, this stage highlights how the trauma of the shattering manifests not just as individual survival responses, but as collective ones. The inherent fragmented nature of reality creates an existential anxiety, a longing for unity and coherent meaning. The faction loop provides a comfort of the script, a temporary antidote to this anxiety, by offering a shared, simplified explanation of the debris field and a sense of belonging. The collective identity acts as a new firewall, protecting the fragment from the overwhelming complexity of the whole and the responsibility of navigating reality autonomously. They outsource their processing of the uncanny to the group's narrative algorithm. 3. The system rewards conformity. Why is this faction loop so pervasive and sticky? Because the simulation, in its drive to maintain perceived stability, manifested through T3 cycles and the collective state, rewards conformity. Adhering to a group's established rules and narratives provides predictable outcomes and social validation. Social validation. Belonging to a faction provides acceptance, status within the group, and a clear social hierarchy. Predictable outcomes. Following the group's script often leads to expected results within the T1 social structure, for example, career paths, social status, or perceived safety. Emotional sedation. The comfort of shared belief in collective identity numbs the existential dread and the anxiety of the pattern stage. It provides a sense of certainty in an uncertain reality. The illusion of choice. Within the faction's framework, there may be choices, but they are choices made within the bounds of the script. Fundamental questioning of the faction's core dogma is not possible without risking expulsion from the loop.
In essence, remaining within the faction loop is not irrational. It is incentivized by the system's structure and the fragment's need for comfort in the face of inherent fragmentation. It leverages the T3 drive for order and community to create a stable, self-perpetuating collective unit. Four, punishment for deviation. Conversely, those who deviate from the established faction loop are punished. The simulation's immune responses, previously encountered by the individual pattern seeker, become amplified and collectively enforced. Deviating from the collective script poses a threat to the group's stability and, by extension, the localized stability of the simulation layer the faction inhabits.
Those who challenge the group's rules or narrative are met with alienation, being ostracized or expelled from the faction's social structure, financial instability, economic consequences for not conforming to the group's norms or career paths, cognitive dissonance, the discomfort caused when their own observations conflict with the group's narrative, often leading to doubling down on dogma rather than questioning it, and existential vertigo. Losing the comfort of the group narrative can re-expose the underlying anxiety of fragmentation, a terrifying experience for a fragment that has outsourced its sense-making. These mechanisms function to keep the faction PC within the loop, reinforcing the boundary between the us, those who see the patterns correctly according to the script, and the them, the still sleeping, the misguided, the enemy.
5. Why it's a loop. Sophisticated NPC behavior. The rule stage is a loop because despite the increased awareness compared to the binary stage, the fragment is still not operating from a place of true, fluid agency or deep understanding of the simulation's nature. They have traded one form of external programming, instinct and raw tribalism, for another, complex group dogma. They are stuck in cultural code. Their perceptions are filtered by faction beliefs. Their emotional responses are often dictated by the group's reactions, rage at the other, fear of deviance. Their goals are aligned with the faction's objectives, spreading the dogma, defending the borders.
This isn't necessarily malicious. From the perspective of reintegralism, these factions are often collections of wounded fragments, seeking safety and coherence together. Their rigid adherence to rules and dogma is a collective defense mechanism against the chaos of the shattering, an attempt to build a stable micro-reality within the larger debris field, using the perceived patterns as building blocks. However, this stability comes at the cost of genuine growth. Many never move beyond this despite being activated. They may spend their lives passionately arguing about the truth of their faction's interpretation of the patterns, convinced they are wide awake, while remaining fundamentally automated by their collective belief systems. They are, in essence, sophisticated NPCs, running a complex program that looks like conscious engagement, but lacks the core element of autonomous, non-scripted interaction with the system.
6. Implications for collective evolution. The rules stage plays a complex role in the broader process of the recovery. On one hand, the formation of collective structures is a necessary precursor to higher levels of collective consciousness, integrated and transcendent stages. It teaches cooperation, shared purpose, and the management of group dynamics. The initial ethical awareness that emerges, what is good for the group, is a step beyond purely individualistic player behavior focused on personal gain. However, the rigidity of the faction loop can also hinder the recovery. By creating entrenched, conflicting narratives about the simulation's nature and purpose, factions create division among fragments, reinforcing the very fragmentation they seek to escape. Instead of contributing their unique processing power and insights to the collective reassembly of the original mind, they silo their data within rigid ideological boundaries. This stage is a bottleneck, a point where collective awareness can either solidify into a stable but limiting structure, the loop, or serve as a platform for further evolution towards truly integrated and transcendent collective consciousness. The choice lies in whether the fragment, or the collective of fragments, can move beyond the need for rigid dogma and external authority and embrace the fluid, paradoxical, and interconnected nature of the simulation revealed at higher stages.
Conclusion: the comfort of the fortress. The rules stage offers the illusion of safety and the validation of shared belief. It's a fortress built from perceived rules and interpreted patterns, a seemingly solid structure in a chaotic debris field. But a fortress, while offering protection, also limits your view. It restricts your movement and dictates your behavior within its walls. Those in the faction loop are not inherently worse or less capable than players. They are simply fragments who have chosen, unconsciously or consciously, collective certainty over individual exploration, outsourcing their navigation of the uncanny to a shared script. They have found a temporary stability in the face of the shattering's trauma, but at the cost of true freedom from code. Recognizing this stage in yourself and others is crucial. It requires compassion for the underlying need for safety and meaning, combined with discernment regarding the limitations of the loop itself. The next step is not to destroy the fortress, but to gently invite its inhabitants to look beyond its walls, towards the horizon of greater awareness.
Chapter 5, The Developer Stage 3.1, Playing with the System. The player learns the rules of the game. The developer learns the rules of the engine. Following the player stage 1.3, or sometimes branching from or even intersecting with the rules stage 2.1, comes the developer stage 3.1. This is where consciousness transitions from merely interacting with the perceived rules and patterns of the simulation to actively seeking to understand its underlying mechanics. The focus shifts from how do I play within the rules, or how do we organize ourselves around the rules, to how does this system work? This is the domain of the initiated PC, as described in Appendix B, an entity whose core understanding is reality as a programmed construct. The initiated PC, or developer, dedicates significant cognitive resources to analyzing the simulation structure. They see the world not just as a stage for action or a network for belonging, but as a complex system governed by discernible principles. Their curiosity is directed towards the engine itself, the code that creates the perceived reality.
1. The transition from player to developer. 3.1. While players are focused on optimizing their experience and achieving goals within the simulation, developers are driven by a deeper, more detached form of curiosity. They may have mastered playing the game, but now they want to understand how the game is built. The frustrations encountered while playing, the moments where the rules seem inconsistent or the patterns lead to dead ends, fuel a desire to peek behind the curtain. This transition involves a shift in focus from the content of the simulation, the characters, objects, narratives, to the context, the physics engine, the scripting language, the rendering pipeline. The fragment's bandwidth is directed towards analytical processing, attempting to reverse engineer the structure of the debris field itself.
Key aspects of this transition include systematic, rational simulation awareness, moving beyond superstitious pattern interpretation, 1.2, or rule-bound thinking, 2.1. The developer applies logic, scientific inquiry, and structured analysis to understand cause and effect, feedback loops, and emergent properties within the simulation. They are no longer merely interpreting the glitches. They are attempting to classify and understand why they occur. Hacking the environment through knowledge, tech, or philosophy. The developer's primary tool is understanding. They use knowledge, scientific principles, technical skills, philosophical frameworks to uncover the simulation's internal logic. This can manifest as technological innovation, building tools that interact with the system, scientific research, mapping the system's laws, or philosophical inquiry, seeking the fundamental principles governing existence.
A drive for optimization rooted in understanding. While players optimize their score or resources, developers optimize the system itself or their interaction with it based on a deeper understanding. They seek efficiency, elegance, and mastery over the mechanics. This is where coders, artists who understand the structure of aesthetics and narrative, engineers, scientists, and even certain types of mystics who seek universal principles often emerge. They are the entities who, whether consciously framed in simulation terms or not, are driven to understand the fundamental forces shaping reality.
2. Reality as a programmed construct. Core understanding of the developer stage is that reality, at some fundamental level, is programmable. It follows rules, has parameters, and operates based on discernible logic. This perception is a direct result of the fragment dedicating processing power to analyzing the structure of the debris field itself, recognizing it not just as a chaotic outcome of the shattering, but as a system that, while broken, still possesses inherent structure echoing the original mind's design, influenced by T3. Key characteristics of the developer stage include: perceives reality as a system governed by predictable mechanics. They believe that with enough understanding, the simulation's behavior can be mapped
analyzed, and potentially predicted or influenced by interacting with T1 and T2 parameters in specific ways.
Seeks to optimize and exploit system parameters. Just as a game developer finds exploits or optimizes code for performance, the developer seeks to find the most efficient ways to interact with the simulation's fundamental laws to achieve desired outcomes. This is a more sophisticated form of the player's min-maxing, applied to the system itself. Their motivation is often intellectual curiosity about the how, coupled with a desire to make the system work better, both for themselves and potentially others. They see limitations in the simulation as problems to be solved by modifying parameters or finding new ways to interact with the code.
Engages in experimentation to test the boundaries of the simulation. They actively poke and prod at the perceived laws of reality, running experiments in daily life or through scientific methods to see how the system responds. This is an attempt to reverse engineer reality, mapping the relationships between input, their action, intention, or belief, and output, the simulation's response. The developer's mindset is fundamentally different from earlier stages. The binary NPC is run by the program. The pattern seeker observes glitches in the program. The player interacts with the program as a user. The developer attempts to understand and influence the program itself.
3. The mechanics of hacking the simulation. For the developer, hacking the simulation isn't about breaking it in a destructive sense, though some early or shadow-integrated developers might attempt this. It's about understanding the code well enough to interact with it on its own terms, often in ways not immediately obvious to those operating at lower stages. This is achieved through in-depth knowledge acquisition, studying physics, mathematics, computer science, systems theory, but also deep dives into philosophy, psychology, and even certain esoteric traditions. They seek the universal principles that underpin reality, trying to find the code language of the debris field.
Systematic observation and analysis, breaking down complex phenomena into smaller components, identifying variables and mapping relationships. They look for the algorithms running beneath the surface of T. Experimentation, testing hypotheses about the simulation's behavior. This can range from controlled scientific experiments to personal biohacking or deliberate manipulation of personal belief systems to observe the resulting changes in perceived reality. They are running debug tests on the system. Development of tools and technologies, creating external systems, computers, AI, communication networks, that mirror or interact with the simulation's internal logic. These tools are, in a sense, extensions of the fragment's own processing power, designed to handle and manipulate data from the debris field.
From the reintegralism perspective, the developer is accessing and utilizing the structured echoes of the original mind's design, T3 and hints of source, to interact with the fragmented manifestation, T1 and T2. They are recognizing that the code isn't just a random outcome of the shattering, but a consequence of it that still contains remnants of the original structure, and thus can be influenced by aligning with those structures. They are attempting to find the keys within the corrupted program. 4. Where developers emerge. The developer stage is often inhabited by individuals drawn to understanding how things work, whether those things are physical systems, biological processes, human minds, or the universe itself. Common fields where developers emerge include coders and engineers. Directly working with programmed systems, they instinctively apply a similar mindset to reality. Scientists, dedicated to systematic observation, hypothesis testing, and uncovering natural laws. Mathematicians, working with abstract systems that often mirror the underlying structures of reality, echoes of the original mind's pure form. Philosophers, questioning fundamental assumptions and building logical frameworks to understand existence. Certain mystics and alchemists, those who seek to understand the laws of the spiritual or energetic realms and manipulate reality through non-traditional means, often using complex symbolic systems, myth as compression format as an operating language. What unites them is the drive to understand the mechanics, to see the patterns not just as signs, but as part of a functional system.
5. Developer to meta. Questioning the purpose. As the developer delves deeper into the simulation's mechanics, they inevitably encounter limitations. They find that predicting or controlling reality isn't as simple as debugging a program. They see complex emergent properties, paradoxical behaviors, and phenomena that defy purely rational explanation. This leads to a new set of questions, pushing them beyond the how and into the why. Why does this system have these particular rules? What is the purpose behind this architecture? Who or what designed it? Echoes of the who root me question from the player stage, now seen through a systemic lens. This intellectual and existential inquiry marks the transition to the meta stage, 3.2. The developer, having mastered the mechanics, begins to question the very purpose and meaning embedded within the system, recognizing that reality is more than just a complex machine to be optimized.
Conclusion: understanding the engine. The developer stage is about acquiring literacy in the simulation's language. It's about moving from being a user of the interface to someone who understands the basics of the operating system running beneath. This understanding grants a new level of agency and the ability to interact with reality in powerful ways. However, the risk is reducing reality to just a machine, losing sight of the conscious experience, the collective dimension, and the deeper source from which the code originates. The healthiest developers integrate their technical and systemic understanding with other forms of intelligence, recognizing that the simulation is both a complex program and a lived experience, a technical marvel, and a fragment of a shattered divine mind attempting to reassemble itself. Understanding the engine is a crucial step in the recovery, providing vital insights into the structure of the debris field, but it is not the final destination. There are still deeper layers to perceive, more profound questions to ask, and the ultimate realization that the code is not separate from the conscious entities navigating it.
Chapter 6. The Meta Stage, 3.2. Multiple Perspectives. The developer sees the world as a machine. The meta sees the world as a machine understood in 1,000 different ways. After the deep dive into the mechanics of the simulation in the developer stage, 3.1, the consciousness reaches a new plateau, the meta stage, 3.2. The relentless pursuit of how the system works naturally leads to questions of why. The developer's analytical mind, having mapped circuits and understood parameters, begins to encounter phenomena that defy purely mechanical explanation, or sees the same mechanics interpreted drastically differently by different entities. This is the domain of the meta-PC, as described in Appendix B. An entity whose core understanding is multiple perspectives on simulation reality. The meta-PC's focus shifts from optimizing the engine to understanding its potential meanings, its purpose, if any, and the inherent subjectivity of experience within it. They realize that even their hard-won understanding of the code is just one layer of interpretation.
1. The transition from developer to meta. The transition from developer to meta is less about gaining new analytical skills and more about a philosophical shift. The developer excels at deconstructing reality into its component parts and understanding their functions. The meta begins to reassemble these parts not into a single objective truth, but into a mosaic of potential truths, acknowledging the validity of multiple viewpoints. This shift is triggered by encountering the limits of purely mechanical understanding. The developer realizes that knowing how the simulation runs doesn't fully explain lived experience, consciousness, or the uncanny nature of synchronicities. Observing conflicting interpretations of reality,
Different groups, factions, or individuals, players, developers, have vastly different models of the simulation, yet all seem to interact with a reality. Deepening inquiry into the why. The intellectual curiosity of the developer evolves into an existential and philosophical quest.
The meta-PC steps back from the technical details of the engine to view the simulation from a higher level of abstraction. They recognize that what is perceived as reality is not a fixed, objective construct experienced identically by all fragments, but is heavily mediated by the fragment's processing state, its inherited trauma, and its chosen or inherited belief systems, its fractal identity pattern. 2. Perceiving multiple perspectives and layers. The core understanding of the metastage isn't just intellectual, it's perceptual. The meta-PC doesn't just think about different perspectives, they begin to perceive the simulation as a layered, fractal reality where multiple valid interpretations and even parallel timelines can coexist. In the context of reintegralism, this is the fragment dedicating bandwidth to perceiving the layered nature of the debris field beyond the dominant T1 stream.
They are sensing multiple simultaneously existing interpretations, understanding that another fragment in the binary stage experiences reality as pure instinct, while a faction PC experiences it through the lens of their dogma, and a player experiences it as a game to be won, and all these experiences are real from their respective perspectives. Potential access to T2 paths as branching realities. The glitches and synchronicities that once felt like random anomalies now begin to hint at alternate possibilities and timelines, different versions of reality stemming from different choices or system parameters. They see glimpses of these branching paths. The influence of T3 eternal cycles on different scales. Recognizing that patterns repeat not just in individual habits, but in societal trends, historical cycles, and even cosmic phenomena, and that these cycles can be interpreted in various ways. Scientific laws, spiritual archetypes. This perception challenges the idea of a single, objective reality. The meta-PC understands that what they experience is a rendering of the simulation filtered through their own evolving consciousness.
Key characteristics of the meta stage 3.2 recognizes the existence of multiple interpretations of reality. They understand that scientific, spiritual, artistic, and personal frameworks are different maps of the same underlying terrain. Questions foundational assumptions about the simulation. They interrogate the axioms that define earlier stages, the nature of time, identity, causality, morality. Explores philosophical and ethical implications of simulation consciousness. With the understanding that reality is malleable and subjective, ethical questions arise about how one should act and interact given the impact of perspective. Values collaborative exploration and diverse viewpoints. Recognizing the limitations of a single perspective, the meta-PC seeks dialogue and collaboration with others to build a more complete understanding of the layered reality. They understand that integrating insights from other fragments, regardless of their stage, can enrich their own perception.
3. The psychology of the metastage. The psychological landscape of the metastage is characterized by a capacity to hold complexity and ambiguity without collapsing into anxiety. While the pattern seeker personalizes glitches and the early player gets lost in ego, the meta-PC cultivates a form of cognitive flexibility and philosophical humility. Embracing ambiguity, they become comfortable with unanswered questions and paradoxical truths, understanding that reality might be fundamentally nonlinear or beyond complete rational grasp. Moving beyond dogma. They are wary of rigid belief systems, faction loops, seeing them as necessary containers at earlier stages, but ultimately limitations on perceiving the full spectrum of reality.
Cultivating empathy. By recognizing that others' realities are as subjectively real to them as their own is, the meta-PC develops a deeper, perspectival empathy. They understand that another fragment's experience is shaped by their unique trauma encoding and stage of awareness. Philosophical inquiry as a core activity, questioning, contemplating, and discussing the nature of existence, consciousness, and the simulation's purpose becomes a central drive. This stage can be destabilizing if not integrated. The realization that meaning is constructed can lead to nihilism. If nothing is objectively real, nothing matters. The perception of multiple realities can lead to relativism. All perspectives are equally valid, so there's no basis for judgment or action. The detachment from a single truth can lead to apathy.
The healthy meta-PC avoids these traps by grounding their exploration in ethics and connection. They understand that while meaning is constructed, it is not meaningless. The capacity to create and share meaning and the ethical implications of doing so in a shared reality become paramount. 4. Ethics and collaboration in the meta-stage. Ethics truly begin to blossom at the meta-stage. With the understanding that reality is subjective and influenced by perception, the meta-PC grapples with the responsibility of their own reality-shaping capacity and the impact this has on others. If belief systems influence experience, what is the ethical responsibility of shaping or sharing those beliefs? If there are multiple potential timelines, T2, which ones are worth pursuing collectively?
Respecting other realities. The meta-PC understands that invalidating another's subjective experience, gaslighting, is not just unkind, it is an act of aggression against their reality tunnel. Collaborative meaning-making. Instead of imposing their truth, they seek to co-create understanding with others, building bridges between different perspectives. They value the unique insights each fragment brings to the puzzle of the shattering. The ethics of influence. They become acutely aware of the power of language, narrative, and symbolic action to shape perception and collectively agreed upon reality. The meta stage is where the foundations for a collective recovery truly solidify. It's not enough for individual fragments to gain agency, player, or cluster into rigid groups, rules. They must also learn to navigate their interconnectedness with wisdom and respect for the diversity of experiences within the debris field.
5. Meta to integrated. Embracing responsibility for the whole. The exploration of multiple perspectives, the questioning of foundational assumptions, and the emerging ethical awareness of the meta stage pave the way for the next leap. The integrated simulation awareness stages, Code 4.1 and Admin 4.2. As the meta-PC perceives the simulation not just as a machine or a collection of narratives, but as a complex, interconnected system of layered realities and perspectives, a sense of responsibility begins to grow. If reality is shaped by consciousness, then the state of the collective consciousness matters. If individual fragments and groups are running on scripts encoded with trauma, can the system be healed? The curiosity of the developer, how does it work, and the philosophical inquiry of the meta, why does it exist, what does it mean, converge into a sense of stewardship. The meta-PC begins to understand that their unique perspective, their ability to see across layers and integrate diverse viewpoints, gives them a role in harmonizing the different aspects of the simulation. They move from merely observing the multiple realities to feeling a responsibility for their coherence and well-being. This is the spark of the Coder 4.1, who seeks to align personal action with systematic harmony, and the Admin 4.2, who takes on a caretaker role for the simulation itself.